Greetings. Welcome back to the Big Fluffy Jamboree Hour, otherwise known as Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. Thank you all for your comments and your discussion. Always interesting, as usual. Someone asked me in the comments yesterday if I believed all the bad news that I read. And I was going to address that in the comment, but I'll just address it here, which is belief has nothing to do with it, because the bad news that I'm reading is actually based on facts and evidence and observation. Scientifically, it exists. It exists in the actual world, in the real world. It's observable evidence. So when you can actually see something for yourself, you don't believe it or don't believe it, it's there. And we can get totally metaphysical about that and, go off on a tangent, but I'm talking about right here, right now, what you can see and observe with your own eyes. So, the bad news that I'm reading every day is based on facts and observable evidence. So it's not something that I believe. It's something that I'm relaying to you as facts, and based in reality. And that is all. So that's my answer to that question. So there's a big climate march today, and there also was a mass shooting in New Zealand. I'm not really going to read anything about that, but everybody knows that this has happened. Anyways, it's horrible news indeed. So, hearts go out to the victims in New Zealand, and also lend your support and your hearts to the climate strike marchers who are out there today, the students, the kids, the children who need their future back. Real quick from Imogen. Imogen posts some news articles in the comments sometimes, and I can't always, I don't always do a good job of relaying them, but this is something she posted today. An oil slick was heading towards the French coastline on Thursday after an Italian cargo ship sank in the Atlantic carrying 45 containers of dangerous materials, authorities said. A sheet of oil 10 kilometers long, or 6 miles, and 1 kilometer wide, could hit parts of the country's southwest region near the port city of Bordeaux this weekend. According to our forecast, fragments could reach some areas of the coast in Nouvelle-Aquitaine by Sunday or Monday, owing to bad weather, which also risks making the anti-pollution operation more difficult. Environment Minister Francois de Rugy said Wednesday, France will deploy 4 ships to help battle the oil slick at sea, prepare for cleanup operations on land. The Grand America was en route from Hamburg in Germany to Casablanca in Morocco when the fire broke out late on Sunday. All 27 people on board were evacuated. All right, yes, more environmental destruction, disaster, just another byproduct of our industrial civilization. So there's a major flooding happening in Nebraska because of this bomb cyclone. Deadly historic Midwest flooding threatens Ericson Dam and nuclear plant in Nebraska. So this is super frightening. New evacuations were ordered overnight in Minnesota and Wisconsin. A Nebraska farmer was killed trying to rescue a stranded motorist. A Nebraska nuclear plant is threatened. A compromised dam forced evacuations along the Niobrara River. A third of the 24,000 residents in Norfolk, Nebraska, were ordered to evacuate Thursday. So I saw videos, lots and lots of videos of flooding yesterday in Nebraska. Crazy amounts of water and flooding, and some one dam burst that I know of. I'm just kind of skipping through some of this information. Flooding in parts of the Midwest has left one man dead, threatens a Nebraska dam and nuclear power plant as heavy rains mixed with melting snowpack swell waterways to historic levels. In Nebraska, a utility company was placing sandbags around a threatened nuclear power plant Thursday at the Missouri River. As the Missouri River continued to rise, the Omaha World Journal reports. So this happened a few years ago when there was lots of flooding in Iowa and Nebraska, and the power plant was very, very close to being inundated. The nuclear power plant was being close to inundated by floodwaters, and here we go again. Mark Becker, spokesman for the Nebraska Public Power District, told the newspaper that should the river hit the level of 45.5 feet as projected by the National Weather Services this weekend, the Cooper Nuclear Station, which accounts for 35% of NPPD's power, will have to be shut down. Becker noted that should the plant shut down, DPPD will be able to get power elsewhere, and they don't expect the closure to lead to outages. Scary stuff happening in Nebraska. I'm going to link this article and you guys can check it out. A third of 24,000 residents in Norfolk, Nebraska were ordered to evacuate Thursday after the city's levee system neared its top. City officials said one person was reported missing after the car was swept away. Also saw lots of high winds and stuff going on in Colorado. This is just all over the place. Earlier Thursday, people were rescued from cabins along the Platte River in Utah, Nebraska. A hospital and nursing home were evacuated in Genoa, Nebraska, after the Loup River overtopped an intake structure at the Loup Power Division. New Channel Nebraska reported. So there's stuff going on in Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and it's a big fat mess. And I'm going to finish up this video with this real quick. I want to say there's Osama hipped me to a link to a site. It's an English YouTube channel called Just Have a Think, which is a funny name for a YouTube channel, but it's about climate change and what's happening. And I think the guy does a weekly video, and quite scientific. It's, just all about the science of what's happening. And so they've got quite a lot of views and quite a lot of subscribers, which is great to see that people are taking notice. Again, I think that people in the UK are much more aware of climate change and much more concerned about it than we are in the US. But maybe I'm wrong. But generally, like the sites that are just real scientific and concentrate on the facts, like tend to have more viewers. Go figure. I don't know why that is, but the people, those are good sites for information, and they clearly spell out what's going on. However, they don't, when you go over the edge of the information into like, where could this lead us, or what should we do about it, or what, that's like a whole nother thing. That's where the viewer count just generally goes, people like to have their knowledge implied for them and maybe not follow the whole path down what it means. But anyways, that's just a little aside. From Truth Out, we're living in the warmest decade since record keeping began. Record keeping being observational facts, records. This is from Darja Mail, March 12th, 2019. Some people are in an outright panic. Some are in full-blown denial. Indeed, human responses to runaway climate disruption are spanning the spectrum, from profiteers plugging books containing solutions to geoengineering attempts like this one blocking out the sun. Many are understandably anxious to move forward with a plan. However, this is also an important time to pause, take some deep breaths, and reconnect with the earth to listen for each of our personal callings as to how to be and then what to do during this time of crisis. Fear and panic are not going to take us where we need to or want to go. I see fear responses resulting from the fact that the gravity of our situation is sinking in now to larger swaths of the general population. 2018 was the fourth warmest year ever recorded, with the only warmer years being 2015, 2016, and 2017. On top of that, the Met Office reported that we are currently in the middle of what is likely to be the warmest decade since record keeping began. So expect more record warmest years in the near future. A recent report warned that if the current climate disruption trends continue, and there's no reason to believe they will lessen, the Himalayas could lose most of their glaciers by 2100 as they warm up by 8 degrees Fahrenheit. This would bring radical disruptions to food and water supplies for upwards of 1.5 billion people, in addition to a mass migration crisis. On that note, as 2 billion people around the globe rely on groundwater aquifers for their fresh water, another study showed that climate disruption has placed nearly half of the groundwater of Earth in danger. Climate disruption is shifting rainfall and will make it harder for 44% of the Earth's aquifers to recharge. We are living in an era of abrupt climate disruption, or ACD. Self-reinforcing feedback loops are accelerating as well as growing in number. More evidence of this comes in the form of sea level rise. Another report warned that Earth today looks much as it did 115,000 years ago, temperature-wise. All we are missing now is the 20 to 30 feet of sea level rise that resulted the last time it was this warm. But in terms of sea level rise, Earth is in the process of catching up. Another recent study revealed a massive cavity growing underneath West Antarctica that covers 2/3 of the footprint of Manhattan and is 300 meters tall. The Thwaites Glacier, where the cavity is located alone, would add 2 feet to global sea levels if it melts. Moreover, the Thwaites Glacier acts as a buttress to neighboring glaciers and ice fields. So if it melts out, it could likely set in motion a catastrophic amount of ice loss, contributing significantly to a global sea level rise. For global sea level change in the next century, this Thwaites Glacier is almost the entire story. New York University geoscientist David Holland told the Washington Post last year. Further distress comes in the form of a report warning of the multifaceted environmental crisis we are facing: topsoil erosion, ocean acidification, climate disruption, logging of forests, and the mass loss of species are converging to destabilize society and the global economy. The report warns that policymakers are not grasping the seriousness of what is being done to the planet. It points out that topsoil is being lost 10 to 40 times faster than it is being replenished by natural processes, and 30% of the planet's arable land has become unproductive due to erosion since just the mid-20th century. The report states that 95% of the Earth's land areas could become degraded by 2050. A recent UN study also warned that the world's food supply is already under severe threat from the ongoing catastrophic loss of biodiversity. Around the world, the library of life that has evolved over billions of years, our biodiversity, is being destroyed, poisoned, polluted, invaded, fragmented, plundered, drained, and burned at a rate not seen in human history. Ireland's president, Michael Higgins, said at a biodiversity conference in Dublin, as reported by The Guardian, if we were coal miners, we'd be up to our waists in dead canaries. Alarmingly, an analysis published in the Biological Conservation Scientific Journal reports that plummeting insect numbers globally could lead to the collapse of nature. Our work reveals dramatic rates of decline that may lead to extinction of 40% of the world's insect species over the next few decades, reads the abstract of the study. It warns that insects could vanish within a century, and the researchers reminded us that insects are essential for the proper functioning of all of Earth's ecosystems, as they are food for other creatures, pollinators, and recyclers of nutrients. Without insects, humans would not survive. Earth, during 2018, different types of climate disruption fueled extreme weather events, including hurricanes and wildfires, cost the U.S. 247 lives and nearly $100 billion in damages. Another report warned of several major cities that could literally become unlivable by 2100 due to climate disruption. Flooding and sea level rise will almost certainly render Miami, New Orleans, and Lagos uninhabitable, while Dhaka in Bangladesh will literally be overrun with refugees from the coast. Heat will make cities like Dubai, Chicago, and New Delhi vulnerable to deadly heat waves that kill growing numbers of vulnerable populations like the elderly and disabled. Don't forget Phoenix. A recent study showed that as the climate continues to warm, plants are absorbing less CO2, hence their natural ability to mitigate Climate disruption by pulling CO2 from the atmosphere is being degraded. A study published recently in the journal Nature reveals how an increase in climate disruption fueled hot and dry periods will dry out the earth, causing fluctuations in soil moisture that change how much excess carbon the soil can absorb from the atmosphere. Hence, extreme weather events like drought can worsen climate disruption. Hence, another feedback loop has been identified. On that note, sudden disruptions in food production on both land and sea, food shocks, have already become far more frequent over the last 50 years, a trend that is expected to increase in the coming years, according to another study. Droughts, floods, other extreme weather events, and conflicts, all fueled by climate disruption, are the culprits. Another study showed that climate disruption-fueled warmer temperatures could increase the number of babies born with congenital heart defects. Damage to the natural world continues apace. Recent research revealed that seabirds on a British island have already declined 80% due to climate disruption and overfishing, which has cut off their food source. Water, an alarming late February report in Scientific American warned that the oceans are running out of breath. Widespread declines in marine oxygen levels, driven largely by climate disruption, are stressing sensitive species, and the trend is only expected to continue. Oxygen levels in some tropical areas have dropped by a shocking 40% in just the last half century. Meanwhile, corals continue their demise as climate disruption, warming waters, coupled with human impacts, continue apace. Australia's Great Barrier Reef, which recently saw floodwaters draining across the reef, smothering the coral, according to scientists, received what some are referring to as a nail in the coffin of its existence. Shortly after that, the Australian government gave the green light to dumping 1 million tons of sludge across the world's largest coral reef. Thanks, Australia. Meanwhile, many oceanic species are disappearing. In Washington state, at least 2 species of salmon in the Puget Sound region may well be nearing the end of their ability to naturally reproduce. Warming waters are not surprisingly the driving force behind the problem. Out on the Pacific coast, a mass die-off of starfish has been tied directly to climate disruption. As the largest disease epidemic ever documented in wild marine species that has been exacerbated by climate disruption is killing them off. Another issue impacting the Pacific Northwest is the fact that as winter snowpacks continue to diminish, alpine lakes are drying up, and so are the frogs and tadpoles that rely on them. In fact, one of the frog species is now at risk of going extinct by 2080, according to the study investigating the matter. For humans, the impacts continue to present themselves. In Bangladesh, as the coastline is battered by more extreme storms as well as being submerged by rising seas, a migration crisis is already underway as people flee toward already grossly overcrowded urban areas further inland. Meanwhile, the rapidly changing climate, drought, and increasingly intense dust storms are quickly turning Iran's Sistan and Baluchistan regions into a dust bowl. Water issues are continuing to mount in the U.S. as well. A recent study showed that from 1982 to 2016, snowpack, which millions of us rely on for water for drinking and irrigation, has decreased by 41% in some regions of the country, while the snow season has shortened by 34 days on average in other areas. Fire. In early February, 3,000 people were forced to flee forest wildfires in New Zealand's South Island as heat and dry conditions persisted there. Meanwhile, in Australia, extreme record heat and drought persisted across much of the country, along with the severe flooding and fires. Thousands of cattle died from the heat, and crops across many areas were lost. In the UK, a wildfire described as apocalyptic by one witness occurred in Marsden, England, as that country broke the record for its warmest winter day. On the same day, another wildfire raged in Edinburgh, Scotland. Firefighters told the BBC the Marsden fire was one of the largest fires they'd ever had to deal with. Wildfires also burned through the UK's Ashdown Forest, best known as the setting of A. A. Milne's classic children's classic Winnie the Pooh, in which the forest is referred to as the 100-acre wood. Air. Another alarming report about increasing levels of methane in the atmosphere has been released by the American Geophysical Union. The report showed that sharp rises in methane have been recorded over the last 4 years, enough so that it is yet another factor showing that the now laughable goal of keeping planetary temperatures below 2°C threshold set by the Paris Agreement is but a pipe dream. What we are now witnessing is extremely worrying. One of the paper's lead authors, Ewan Nisbet of, is it Ian? I don't know, or maybe Ewan Nisbet of Royal Holloway, University of London, told The Guardian, it is particularly alarming because we are still not sure why atmospheric methane levels are rising across every single time the scientists, I don't know. I don't know why. Why is this happening? We're scientists. You know why it's happening. Come on. One place that could look for clues would be the Arctic, where early spring rains are thawing permafrost faster, which is releasing more methane than ever, according to the study. Meanwhile, Australia baked amidst a record heat wave. The city of Adelaide in the south broke its all-time heat record, reaching 46.6 degrees Celsius, amid more than a dozen other high-temperature records that brought animal culls and fish deaths. Temperatures even neared a staggering 50 C in other towns as homeless people and other vulnerable sectors of the population struggled to cope with the heat. As the extreme temperatures there persisted, the town of Nuna set a record minimum temperature, the low temperature for that 24-hour period, of 35.9 C, another Australian heat record. When all is said and done, January was the hottest month on record for the entire country as the average temperature exceeded 30 C. Troublingly, Svalbard, Norway, where the global seed vault is located, received grim news in the form of a new climate report that warned the area could become 10 C warmer in the coming decades. The report also warned, that's just incredible, of thawing permafrost and heavy rainfalls to come that will trigger landslides and coastal erosion. The global seed vault was created in order to preserve a large variety of plant seeds that are spare copies of seeds held in gene banks around the world. By doing so, it is an attempt to secure their existence against the loss of seeds and other seed banks during a global crisis. Another study warned that climate disruption is on track to cause New York to feel like Arkansas by 2080. The study warned that at the current trajectory, 2080, trajectory of warming, Chicago could feel more like Kansas City. San Francisco would have a climate more like Southern California. These are extremely conservative estimates, by the way. So, a lot of these studies and a lot of these prognostications for the future are based on, the more linear changes, not taking into account exponential change, which is the biggest monster in the room. Exponential change speeds all of these estimations up, by 30, 40, 50 years, right? Lastly, in the section, another recent study warned that if current fossil fuel emissions continue on the trajectory that they are on, we could live in a world without clouds in roughly 100 years, in which case global temperatures would be 8 C warmer than they are today. If this should come to pass, it would essentially mean that the end of most, if not all, complex life on Earth. Denial and reality. Plenty of denial fodder this month. As usual, Donald Trump provided a deafening silence in the State of the Union address by not speaking a word about the global climate disruption crisis. Instead, he was doing things like tweeting this gibberish. In the beautiful Midwest, wind chill temperatures are reaching minus 60 degrees, the coldest ever recorded. In coming days, expected to get even colder. People can't last outside even for minutes. What the hell is going on with global warming? Please come back fast. We need you. Trump also went on to pick John Christie, a climate disruption skeptic, to be on the advisory board of the Environmental Protection Agency. Christie once said that scientists believe the Earth was flat. Awesome. Meanwhile, the White House has just set up a panel whose job is to reassess federal climate disruption studies and counter their conclusions. While many states are actively teaching and expanding their school curricula to properly teach about climate disruption, things aren't as good in other states, where several are now introducing bills that could interfere with teachers using scientifically founded theories about human-caused climate disruption in school science curricula. This is happening in South Dakota, Arizona, Virginia, Maine, and Montana. Good Lord. Yet, in direct contrast to this denialism, corporate America is all too aware of the coming chaos from climate disruption. Bank of America Corporation worries flooded homeowners will default on their mortgages, Bloomberg reported. Got to worry about the money at the end of the day. The Walt Disney Company is concerned its theme parks will get too hot for vacationers. Tisk, tisk. While AT&T Incorporated fears hurricanes and wildfires may knock out its cell towers. The Coca-Cola company wonders if there will still be enough water to make Coke. Just a message to all corporations. Close up shop, fold your doors, stop destroying the planet. Be a help, will you? Be a dear and just go away. As the Trump administration rolls back rules meant to curb global warming, new disclosures show that the country's largest companies are already bracing for its effects, the documents reveal. So is the military, by the way. Documents reveal how widely climate change is expected to cascade through the economy, disrupting supply chains, disabling operations, and driving away customers, but also offering new ways to make money. Additionally, U.S. intelligence officials have warned that human-caused climate disruption is a worldwide threat. A recent poll that studied public opinion in 26 countries showed that in 13 of them, people felt that climate disruption was the #1 security threat. In January, the Bulletin of Atomic Science, this article goes on and on. In January, sorry, I just have minimal time to do this, and this went very long. In January, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists announced that its symbolic doomsday clock is set at 2 minutes to midnight, the same as it was for last year. This means that due to the ongoing threat of nuclear war and unchecked climate disruption, the world is as close to catastrophe as it was in 1953 during the early and volatile stages of the Cold War. We are like passengers on the Titanic, ignoring the iceberg ahead, enjoying the fine food and music. Former California Governor Jerry Brown, who is now the Bulletin's executive chairman, told the Guardian. Really? That's odd. Interesting. But thanks for, selling all those oil rights, Jerry Brown. Glad you were concerned. Thankfully, advocacy groups are scaling up their outreach and public education efforts in an attempt to ensure more people confront the reality of climate disruption. If you only have a minute to get an idea of how rapidly the planet is now warming, Yale Environment 360 has created this excellent short video to view. Lastly, to underscore everything covered in this month's dispatch, a new study showed that humans are injecting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere at a rate 9 to 10 times higher than it was emitted during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM, global warming event 56 million years ago, which acidified the oceans and drove large numbers of marine species to extinction. In fewer than 5 generations from now, as soon as 2159, laugh if you will at that date, the total amount of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere could reach what it was during the PETM. Given a business as usual assumption for the future, the rates of carbon release that are happening today are really unprecedented. Even in the context of an event like PETM, Gabriel Bowen, a geophysicist at the University of Utah, told the American Geophysical Union of Study, "We don't have much in the way of geologic examples to draw from in understanding how the world responds to that kind of perturbation." Larissa DeSantis, a paleontologist at the Vanderbilt University, told the AGU of the study, "The fact that we could reach warming equivalent to the PETM very quickly within the next few hundred years is terrifying. To underscore how far along we already are, we conclude with these figures from the CO2.Earth website, CO2.Earth. The January 2018 temperature across global land and ocean surfaces was 0.71 C, or 1.24 Fahrenheit above the 20th century average. That could be debatable, of 12.0 C. January 2018 marks the 42nd consecutive January since 1977 and the 397th consecutive month since January 1985, with temperatures at least nominally above the 20th century average. This was the 5th highest temperature for January in the 1880 2018 record. The last 4 years, 2015 to 2018, rank among the 5 highest Januaries on record. The global land and ocean temperature during January has increased at an average rate of 0.07 C per decade since 1880. However, the average rate of increase is twice as great since 1975. Meanwhile, on February 9th, the highest daily average atmospheric CO2 concentration measurement ever recorded by the Mauna Loa Observatory occurred when we reached 414.27 ppm. Click anywhere on the Earth No School map, and your results may vary. Sometimes those CO2 measurements are as high as 460 in some places in the U.S. The observatory is the world's primary benchmark site for measuring CO2. But the Mauna Loa, that's the global average, right? Or generally taken as what it might be, the median or the mean across the planet. I'm pretty sure about that. Like Mauna Loa is like, in the ocean on an island far, far away from a lot of industrial activity, right? But if you go over the Great Lakes area, Great Lakes, Ohio, Michigan, those readings are high. Lastly, just wanted to dip into a few political things. This is from Forbes. Department of Homeland Security compiling database of journalists and quote unquote media influencers. Anyone else? So in today's installment of I'm Not Terrified, You Are, Bloomberg government reports on fedbizops.gov posting by the Department of Homeland Security with the relatively benign sounding subject, media monitoring services. The details of the attached statement of work, however, outline a plan to gather and monitor the public activities of media professionals and influencers, and are enough to cause nightmares of constitutional proportions, particularly as the freedom of the press is under attack worldwide. Attack is not hyperbolic. Everyday journalists face serious consequences, including physical violence, imprisonment, or death. See Julian Assange. We're not talking about CNN or MSNBC, you know, the fragile ones, the fragile propagandists over there. We're talking about actual people that are, Serena Shim was a woman's name who died in Turkey, covering the fact that we might have been shipping arms to ISIS. We're talking about those people doing real journalism, right? A few days ago, the Committee to Protect Journalists launched its annual Free the Press campaign to raise awareness about imprisoned journalists throughout the world. On May 3rd, UNESCO will once again mark World Press Freedom Day to inform citizens of violations of press freedom. Meanwhile, the United States government, traditionally one of the bastions of press freedom, is about to compile a list of professional journalists and top media influencers, which would seem to include bloggers and podcasters, and monitor what they're putting out to the public. What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, I mean, it's definitely happening. It's absolutely happening. I'm pretty positive that there's lots of people, lots of different people that follow this channel. God Lord. You know, there's people from the Grand Solar Minimum crowd, a handful. There's some denier types, some, you know, the skeptic types. And I'm absolutely sure that there's some dummy accounts out there following me. And you know, as if I'm so important. You know how important I am. But in the realm of climate change, I mean, like most climate, you know, sites have so many minimal views. It doesn't really matter how popular you are. If you're doing any real climate reporting or climate communicating, you're most likely being observed, especially if you're calling for, you know, the drawdown of industrial civilization. If you're talking about degrowth of, you know, industrial civilization or our economy, or, you know, possibly nationalizing corporations, I mean, they're definitely watching you. They're definitely paying attention to that. And we do talk about that here. And lastly, just a short aside, Facebook bans Zero Hedge. I know a lot of you all, we have, you know, some people leave Zero Hedge links in the comments, and some people are like, Zero Hedge, how could you possibly ever read anything from Zero Hedge? Oh my God. They do actually, you know, they're mainly on the righty conspiracy side, and but they do have good economic information. And sometimes they actually, I read a few articles lately that, you know, weren't necessarily right slanted. They were just giving information, but whatever. But I find this, you know, again, you start banning some channels, and then you have the scenario to set up that you can start banning other channels. And I've heard a lot of talk, you know, there seems to be a lot of talk about YouTube starting to pull certain videos and pull certain things with certain ideas, and even commenters. A new thing now is sites can be warned or taken down or punished because of comments that people leave. So that's interesting. Guilt by association. and of somebody that you don't even know. So that's always fun for free speech, right? That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Lastly, everything's moving at a glacial speed, guys. Sorry if you haven't. A bunch of people asked me for stickers. I still haven't put them in the mail. I'm going to try and do everything all at once. The stickers and the T-shirts. Just everything is just, every little thing in my life is just really slow. So working on getting the T-shirts made. Hopefully, next week they'll all go out. But thank you for your patience. I've got orders. I've got everybody's information. So all that looks good. Until next time, peace.